With the recent firmware update of the Lumix S5 II and 2X adding the new electronic stabilization, it made me beg the question, which Lumix camera, the G9 Mark II or the S5 IIX, has the best stabilization? Yesterday, I got to beat up with Rhett Thompson. If you don't know who Rhett is, I have an entire podcast episode you can check out right there. But we were really pitting this camera to the test, showing off the differences of stabilization, testing it in multiple different scenes with no electronic stabilization, the standard, and the high modes, doing the exact same movements again and again. Now, instead of me telling you which camera is which, I'm going to play a little A/B test and give you the answers as we go along the test to let you decide if you can really notice the difference between the S5 IIX and the G9 Mark II. So we're going to be testing out the S5 IIX and
the G9 Mark II.
And we're gonna put these stabilizations really to the test, show you guys the differences between the standard and electronic high stabilization settings, and for you guys to decide which camera should you pick up. Stick with the micro four thirds with the stabilization. That's what it's always been known for.
Yep.
Or is it time to switch over to full frame or purchase a full frame camera because the stabilization is now on par with a micro four thirds?
Okay, so we just did the walking test, but I feel like stabilization is useful for a lot more stuff than that. I do these like kind of rotating kind of shots for lots of B-roll, weddings, products, whatever. So I figured we'd test that out. What do you think?
Yeah, so like Rhett was just saying, we just did the whole walking scene, which is pretty standard. That's basically what everyone does. I know Dustin just did an entire running with this camera, which looked insane.
Yeah.
But we're gonna be really pinning these cameras more to the test, showing more dynamic movements that you would actually be doing in a real life scenario.
Yeah, and those movements can typically, sometimes with other systems, trip up the electronic modes especially. So yep, because I'm curious.
The electronic modes on these cameras are trying to predict our movements as we're doing it. It's not as simple as walking forward or walking back. This is gonna add a lot more dynamic, and it's gonna show how these cameras react in certain scenarios.
All right.
So what are your thoughts on this camera, S5 IIX versus the G9 Mark II in terms of stabilization? What's kind of overall thoughts? I honestly thought after testing this and using it, and not in comparison with this one side by side, I thought night and day, this was gonna be a lot better.
Yeah.
But I was shocked.
Yeah, my thoughts were they were probably gonna be the same, because I hear that said a lot, and without comparing them side by side, they are both very good. But when you do the same moves with the same settings, same focal lengths, equivalents, it is noticeable that that's easier to handle. And even maybe there's a weight thing. You know, I would think the heavier weight would stabilize it more.
I assume the heavier weight would have been helpful.
But
like,
I don't know.
Every shot on this looked closer to, and the way I say it, people don't like how I say it because they're comparing it to today's GoPros.
Yeah.
But this, like, GoPro 7,
yeah,
this is like that same stabilization where it's like good. It's not great, but it's like really good. Like, it's not gimbal yet, but it's like, this is getting there a lot closer. I thought the gap between this and this would be very small, and it's still, I would say, a good bit off that where this stabilization matches this stabilization.
I would agree. But, you know, I'm sure you'll take a look at the results on the big screen at the home and the computer and give a more
in-depth
breakdown.
I was gonna say analysis. So after the test, I was actually pretty shocked on how far the G9 Mark II is to the S5iiX. On the first scene, when it was just that walking forward and walking back, it was kind of really hard to tell which camera was which, because I feel like the way the electronic stabilization works is it's trying to guess your movements as you're doing them in real time. So when you're doing those walking forwards or walking backs, it's really hard to tell between the G9 Mark II and the S5iiX. However, when we started doing some more dynamic movements, doing sort of those panoramas and doing different things like that, what I ended up noticing was that the G9 Mark II had a lot more smoother movements versus the S5iiX felt like it was kind of moving back and forth as it was predicting the different types of movements. Now, when I was like testing it all out, I was like, is it just me like having an issue with the camera, like using the S5iiX? But I used the G9 Mark II on one of the shootings and scenes, and it was like the stabilization was still a lot better in the moment using the G9 Mark II instead of the S5iiX. So my overall thoughts and conclusions is, which stabilization is better between these two cameras? I would say if you're doing more complex or complicated scenes, the G9 Mark II takes the cake. Doing anything that takes a lot more movement, a lot more dynamic, going left and right, the G9 Mark II is definitely the clear winner in my opinion. However, if you're doing more basic moving forward, coming back, dolly zooms, different things like that, the S5iiX caught up to a Micro Four Third camera, to their own Lumix Micro Four Third camera by a lot. Those movements just walking forward and walking back, if you just added just a little bit of stabilization in post, say 10% or something, it would almost look like a gimbal. Also, huge shout out for Rhett hanging out with me for the day, filming this little thing. We did do a podcast, which will be over on his channel if you want to check that out. So go over to Rhett's channel, send him some love, say Matthew sent you. Now, overall, if you're looking for a camera that can definitely get you a lot more stabilization, the G9 Mark II takes the cake. And if you want to see my review video on that, you can check out that video right here. And then YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Till next week, guys, peace.